What's up YouTube? This is All Things Quick. Today we're going to be working on my 2000 Dodge Dakota 4.7 liter. What we're going to be doing is replacing a power steering pump. We're leaving the reservoir with the new pump, but we're replacing the actual power steering pump. And I'm going to show you today how to replace it. The only tools that you'll be needing for this job: 5/8 open end wrench, pair of channel locks, doesn't have to be this big, 10 mil, 12 mil, 13 mil, ratchet, and an extension. You might need a longer extension or two extensions for taking off the fan shroud, and a 15 mil wrench. First things first, you have your coolant reservoir here, fan shroud, and your washer fluid. It's all attached as one unit. So you can actually take this section out. I've already removed it, but you can take this section out with two 10 millimeter bolts, one on each side, and the locations will be here, one 10 millimeter bolt, and another will be right here, another 10 millimeter bolt. Kind of in weird locations when you're actually unbolting them, but this is the fan shroud that you'll have to remove to be able to get to the pump. Once you've removed that, you just set that aside. You're also going to have to disconnect this sensor here, this sensor as well. So both of these clips, one will be here, one's right there. You disconnect those. You remove your actual hose for your windshield washer fluid to the fluid pump. What I've done here is I've just capped the end of this one. I just had a little rubber cap and I just stuck it on the end of that so it doesn't leak fluid. You can see that right here. Or just drain the fluid and just buy some new stuff, whatever you prefer. This overfill hose right here, you're going to want to plug it. You don't really have to. As long as it's sitting up straight, it's not going to leak anything out. It may not even leak anything out at all, but it's just a good idea to put something in there just so if it's hanging down, it's not going to leak. Next thing you're going to need is something to drain your power steering fluid into. Unlike me, thought about it afterwards and I leaked fluid all over my floor, so don't make that same mistake. After removing the fan shroud, what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to come over here to your tensioner, which is that bolt right there. You're going to want to get your box end on that. You're going to want to push it to the right, and you're going to get some slack in this belt. And then from there, you just want to take it off of the power steering, just like that. Then you can let go of your wrench. If you have any questions about how to actually put the Serpentine Belt back on, you can pause the video and check that out. Or if yours is on your truck, you can simply just look at it. So I tried rebuilding my power steering pump. It didn't exactly work. My symptoms were that I was having power steering fly out of the front side of the pump. So you can see I tried to use some gasket maker and tried to reseal it with some new gaskets. Didn't exactly work, so I moved on to purchasing a replacement pump. I'll throw a video in right now of what that actually looked like. So we're going to start this off on this removal by first removing that bolt right inside of this hole right there. You can turn your pulley to whichever spot you'd like to remove the bolt from. This one is a 12 millimeter bolt. Going to be right inside there, kind of a 3 o'clock position. 12 millimeter, it's a really small bolt, so you're going to want to be careful that you don't lose it in your engine bay. This little guy right here. Next thing, you'll need a 13 mil, and you want to just go along. You can see those two bolts right there. You're going to want to get those two with a 13 mil. Also, there's one on the bottom side. Just go ahead and remove these bolts through those holes, and then the top one. Your last bolt will be here on the bottom. You might have to get actually behind the pulley to feel around for where the bolt actually is. Once you get a hold of it with your 13 mil, you can then extract that bolt, and then your pump will fall down, but that doesn't matter because it's trash anyways. Take your bolt out through that hole, just like that. It's just the same as you would with the other ones. Now we're on to the next step. Next thing you're going to want to do is unclip this connector right here that's on your high pressure power steering line. Moving along to the back side of this power steering pump, there will be two bolts. You can see them right there. Those two bolts right there are both 12 millimeter bolts, so you're going to want to take those off for the reservoir to disconnect from the pump. The fluid's going to start coming out from the reservoir, but at this point we're going to disconnect the high pressure line as well. So the next thing is you're going to want to put a 5/8 open end wrench on that, and you're going to want to disconnect that high pressure line. That's right on the bottom side of the pump. Once you have that disconnected, you should be looking at this. This is the high pressure line. That there was in the bottom side of your pump. pump and you slide it down and disconnect it. So at this point, if you are changing the reservoir, you're going to want to come back here and see this clip right here. You want to clamp it down with some little channel locks, clamp it down, move it back, and pop this hose off of the reservoir. But in this case, we're not changing this, so I'm not going to worry about that. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to wiggle that bracket off of the actual pump itself. It takes a little bit of finagling to get it off, but it's able to pop off if you can slide it around a bit. All right, so if you're trying to save your pump, by the way, don't drop it on the floor like I just did, because that's what can happen, but that's okay. I had a problem getting my pump off. To be honest, if it's coming off and it's garbage anyways, I would just say just get it off however you can get it off. Yeah, this was on this. I took the 2 bolts off, got it off. Now we're done with this one, and we're on to the good one. So in the kit, they will give you 2 little pieces. They'll give you a little plastic piece like this and a little rubber gasket like that. That goes in this orientation, plastic down, gasket on top, inside of the part that the reservoir goes into. So for reference, bottom side here is where the high pressure line threads in with the 5/8. This is where the reservoir goes in. So essentially it'd be sitting like this. So you have your reservoir on the side, high pressure on the bottom. If it's a new pump like mine, you're going to want to remove these 2 12mm bolts right here, because those are the ones that the reservoir will actually mount to right here, 1 and 2. So go ahead and remove those. So we got those 2 removed. Those will go there. While they're off, right now is a really good time to put some anti-seize on it, so that next time you go to take something like this out, it's not going to be so hard. Those 2 back holes there are going to go right there. So there you should have your reservoir mounted to your actual power steering pump. The way that these things slide in and out is you put the front clip underneath at the bottom. You'd put the front clip underneath here, and you would slide it and rotate it inwards. And then these 2 bolts will line up with the holes. So you put it in and then rotate it just like that. And if you're still watching, just hang with me, because we're almost finished this process. The next part of this puzzle is to put the power steering high pressure line back in. So we got this guy down here, looks like a brake line fitting, 5/8 open end wrench. We're gonna have to put that back onto the bottom side. It's not a bad idea to throw a little bit of Teflon tape on that just to make sure that it's making a good seal. Of course, the Teflon tape is just personal preference, doesn't have to be done. So you're just gonna screw that in to the bottom side of the pump. And for reference, the bottom of the pump looks like that. So you're gonna actually thread it into that thing. So the hardest part about this is actually finding a good angle to be able to thread that in. I'm gonna want to take my 5/8 open end and just tighten that up nice and snug, not so tight that you're gonna strip it out or anything like that. So once we have that all tightened up, our next step is to actually mount it to the spot in which it came from. So it's 4 bolts. 3 of them are 13 mil, 13 on the top, 13 on the left side, 13 on the bottom, and then there's one last bolt that's a 12 mil. 12 mil you can do before or after, doesn't matter, but that's the one that goes right there. It's right above the reservoir, and that's the last bolt that holds the reservoir in place. So as you can see, we got that 12mm bolt in there. All that's left is top, bottom, and the left hand side. That has to be mounted onto that. So we have these 3, and these 3 will go onto here. And just like that, tighten up those bolts. You can orient this pulley in any which way so the hole will actually line up with your bolt. Once that's done, you're going to want to come over here and reconnect our sensor, plug that guy back in. Other than that, it's just the Serpentine belt that has to go back on. And again, you can reference to this photo right here on your vehicle, or this one if you don't have one on your vehicle. This is the orientation that it's supposed to be. Right down in there is our tensioner. So a good trick and a good tip is to put the belt in the orientation that you want it first. Put your 15 mil in here, grab another wrench, box end, put it on, and you'll have a lot more tension. Then we'll be able to slip this right over the alternator, just like that. You're just going to want to make sure that all your belts and everything are straight. Mine are not. Around my water pump right now, it's a little loose. So just make sure that all the sides are lined up. Every pulley has something on it. Make sure it's good. And now it's just moving on to putting the fan shroud back on. So before I go and put my fan shroud back on, I'm actually going to fill this reservoir up, and I'm going to turn my motor on and make sure that nothing's leaking. It's a good idea to test your system first and make sure that you haven't just wasted your time by potentially having another leak. So I'm going to fill this thing up. You should definitely use a funnel and don't do it the way that I'm doing it. So that's filled. Put the cap back on so it doesn't spray everywhere. And I'm going to start my truck and make sure there's no leaks. So that looks like that's good news. Looks like there's no more leaks. You guys saw at the beginning of the video how much it was leaking, so this, I would call that a pass. Once you've turned your truck on and you've turned the steering wheel to make sure that it's getting through the system, go ahead and top it up. They say that there's a minimum and a maximum. I don't care. You guys can fill it to the maximum or whatever you want. I'd say put it to the line right there. So before you put this fan shroud back in, you're going to want to take this hose. You're going to want to plug it right in there. And that's your coolant overflow tank. Then from there, you can take this tank and you can kind of tip it in towards your power steering pump that we just changed. Might take a little finagling to get that in there, but she'll go. And then we're gonna have to put a bolt in down here and a bolt in on the other side there. So this side has 3 things we need to be aware of. One of these things is your hose for your windshield washer motor. We're gonna take that little plug out that I told you about at the beginning of the video, and then we're gonna plug it right back in. Then we'll take our sensor for our washer fluid motor, put that back in, and then we have another sensor down here. So that side's tied up, everything's done with the sensors. Now this is where it can get tricky, and this is where I had problems at the very beginning. This was honestly probably the hardest thing that I did, but it's the simplest thing to do. Right down in there is a hole for a 10mm bolt. You're gonna want to get an extension and bolt that thing in, and it's the exact same on the other side. Alright guys, and if you can get those last 2 bolts that are almost impossible to get in there, then you're finished your job. I really appreciate you guys watching, especially if you stuck all the way through till the end. If you did like this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, because this stuff honestly is really hard to make it when you're by yourself. Like trying to get these camera angles, trying to do everything, trying to actually film so that I can help you guys out is very difficult to do it when I'm by myself. So don't forget to leave a like, comment down below if you got any questions or comments or concerns, or let me know what you thought of this video. If this helped you, definitely let me know in the comments, because I love hearing that kind of stuff. Don't forget to subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching. See you later.